Mhm.
What a different place we'd be in if HIV hadn't come on the scene in the way that it had.
Yeah. And I think COVID too, like that was also a turning point for me. I was already sort of involved in HIV advocacy, but then COVID was like such a stark reminder that, you know, sometimes our governments and certain administrations pick and choose what they prioritize, right?
Hmm.
And COVID was one of those things where there was a huge delay in prevention for certain communities. And it was very reminiscent of the early AIDS epidemic. And that was sort of the time where I had a huge epiphany. I was like, you know what? Like, groups like ACT UP and a lot of the activists during the early AIDS epidemic were sort of at the forefront of what we call public health now. And
Hmm.
we owe them a lot of credit for some of the things that we feel entitled to and some of the things we take for granted with regard to public health. And so I think for me, it's part of like my queer politic to carry forth this legacy of HIV and AIDS advocacy and education.
And queer people, especially those who are survivors of the HIV/AIDS crisis, I think COVID was very triggering for a lot of those survivors.
Absolutely, yeah. There was so much grief that happened, so much sudden loss that happened due to COVID. And I've talked to survivors of the early AIDS epidemic, and so much of the narrative is just that like their friends were disappearing left and right. And just, reading the obituaries every week to keep up with who was still alive. And I think that was sort of the climate of COVID as well, just like not really knowing what's going to happen and not really understanding why there was such a delay in hope and so much conservatism around publicly funding resources for communities, such as like, nationalizing the hospitals and just making them more financially secure so that they can serve the communities in ways that prevent this death dealing illness from spreading. And so the parallels were really, really shocking.
Yeah, one of my mentors said that we're going to be dealing with the aftermath of the COVID epidemic. Not that COVID is over; it's not over.
Right. Yeah.
But we're going to be dealing with it for the rest of our careers. And I think that's there's probably a similar basis between that and the AIDS crisis.
Absolutely. Yeah.